We'll begin with Captain Roger Sallas. Am I pronouncing that right, sir?
Salas is correct. Thank you, Ms. Kilpatrick and panel. I would first like to briefly describe the incident that I experienced in March 1967. At that time, I was a first lieutenant, U.S. Air Force, stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana. I was trained and assigned duties as a missile launch officer for the Minuteman I intercontinental ballistic missile. I was designated Deputy Missile Combat Crew Commander and part of a two-man crew. My commander at that time was Lieutenant Frederick Mywald. He's now deceased. I will briefly review the diagrams showing the Launch Control Center, the launch facility. We will show you shortly when one of the other speakers present. We were on duty inside the Oscar Launch Control Center, a concrete capsule located about 60 feet underground. We had operational control over 10 Minuteman nuclear missiles. Each missile operates independently and has its own source of primary and backup power systems. It is important for you to note that the command and control for these missiles was entirely located within the capsule. There was absolutely no means to affect any of the missile systems from outside the capsule. On the evening of March 24, 1967, while my commander was on a scheduled rest break, I received the first of two phone calls from my topside flight security controller, FSC. The first call was to report unidentified lighted objects flying above the facility. They reported they were flying at very high speeds, making very odd maneuvers, nothing an aircraft could do, and they just wanted to report it. I didn't pay much attention to that first call, and I basically hung up on them. Minutes later, the FSC phoned again and reported in a very agitated state that there was a large oval-shaped object hovering above the front gate. It was a red, pulsating, lighted object, approximately 30, 40 feet in diameter. The best he could describe it. It was difficult to distinguish a structural part of it on the inside, except that it was glowing red, pulsating object. He had all the men out there with their weapons drawn. He wanted me to tell him what to do next. I, of course, told him something like, make sure nothing comes inside the perimeter fence. Of course, our primary duty was to secure those nuclear missiles. Immediately after that call, I started to inform my commander about the incident. As I started to inform my commander, our missiles began to shut down. We lost alert status on all 10 missiles while this object was above our facility. When we queried the fault system, all missiles reported guidance and control system failure. We had a way of querying faults within the system called VERSA. It's a voice-activated system. And we were getting channels 9 and 12, which is guidance and control system. At the same time, we had indicator lights showing security violations at two of the launch facilities where the missiles were physically located. While Lieutenant Mywald reported the incident to the wing command post, I phoned upstairs and directed the security alert team to be sent to those launch facilities with security violations to investigate those indications. At that time, the FSC reported to me that the object had flown off at high speed. When the security alert team arrived at the affected LFs, and I'll brief LFs meaning launch facilities, they reported seeing the object hovering over those sites. As they approached closer to the object, they lost all communications with the FSC. After speaking to the wing command post, Lieutenant Mywald informed me that the same thing happened at another flight. At that time, I assumed that meant that night, but it turns out what he meant was it happened at another flight about a week earlier, and that's the Echo flight incident, which I'll talk about shortly. Right now, I'd like you to hear the portion of the conversation I had with Colonel Mywald, who retired as a full colonel And I had this conversation sometime in 1996. Can we play the first audio, please?
Back and forth to phase because they were doing maintenance on, I don't know, the guidance cans or something, and the maintenance crews were staying over, and there was security and maintenance on site on both, on two of the 10 sites. And when the first one went down, I talked to the security out there. They had reported this UFO hovering over the site, and I said, "Yeah, right. What are you guys drinking out there?" And we struck strike teams to both of the sites that had been occupied. And both strike teams, I didn't tell them what we had heard via the LF radio, and I told them to go to get within a mile of the site and call back in on the VHF. And they both had reported it too. So we had 2 maintenance crews, 2 security troops on site, and 2 strike teams all reporting it.
Is that right?
Yep.
Do you remember any of the names of any of those guys?
Nope.
You don't?
Sorry, there's a little mix-up there. That was Colonel Walter Fiegel, who was the Deputy Missile Crew Commander at Echo Flight. Can we have the Mywald audio, please?
Any reports from their field about UFOs?
So I remember the 2 guards that had gone out to one of the sites finally got back scared to death. We had to relieve them of duty.
Yeah. Oh, you mean our guards?
Yeah,
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, roving patrol type.
Oh, I see.
They had gone out to one of the sites, one of the LFs, and on the way back they lost radio contact, and we ended up having to send them back to base earlier. I'm not sure what happened. I don't think they ever returned to guard duty.
And what were they scared about?
Well, they had seen these some crazy things. Then
Oh, they did?
yeah,
They reported that to you?
they reported it to the top side guy.
Oh, the topside guy, that's right, okay. Okay. Okay, well, interesting, don't you think?
Yeah.
After we were relieved by another crew the next morning, I arrived back at base.
Mr. Salas?
Yes.
In a couple sentences, would you tell us what we just heard? The conversation.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it was a little confusing. The first conversation you heard was Colonel Walter Fiegel, now retired. As far as I know, he's still alive. He's authorized me to use that audio, by the way. It was a recording of a telephone conversation I had with him in 1996. And he described the fact that he had, on 2 of his launch facilities, he had maintenance crews out there and security guards. And when the first missile went down in his flight, they reported that there were UFOs overhead as the missiles went down. He lost all 10 of his missiles in rapid succession. That incident occurred on March 16th, 1967.
You launched them and they went down?
No, the missiles were not launched. He just reported, they reported that the objects were above them, and at that point the missiles started shutting down. Yeah, disabled. The second audio recording you heard was that of Colonel Mywald talking about the fact that we had security light violations and we had to send guards out to one or more of the LFs. And they reported seeing the UFOs again. By the way, I've got more audio available that's where Colonel Mywald supports my entire statement about what occurred. So he was consistent on supporting this for up until the time he passed away last year. After we received relieved by another crew the next morning, right back to the base, we reported to the squadron commander's office. There we were ordered to sign pardon me, non-disclosure statements regarding our specific incident. I did sign a non-disclosure statement. Excuse me. And we were ordered not to talk to anybody about this. It was then designated a highly classified incident. At no time did we lose Power during the incident, I want to emphasize, we always had electrical power. The sensitive information network, SIN cables that carried the signals to the missile systems were triply shielded from electromagnetic interference. The preliminary investigation isolated the failure to the logic coupler at each missile. The logic coupler is associated with the missile guidance system. That's about the best I can explain to you what the logic coupler does. I'll refer you to a portion of the unit wing history. I believe you have documents that I supplied you with that talk about the Echo flight incident, and I'll just read part of it. It says, in the opinion of the team, was that externally generated signals caused the generation of these two channels and shut down the launch facilities. The possibility of this is very remote due to the fact that all 10 couplers would have to fail in the flight within a few seconds of each other. This statement confirms that signals were sent to each individual missile separately in order to disable them. From my knowledge of the operating system at the time, neither I nor the investigative team could define the method or means by which these signals were sent to disable the missiles, each in the same manner, meaning each missile failed for the same reason, guidance and control system failure. Mr. Robert Kaminsky was the Boeing team leader for the investigation of the Echo flight shutdown. In a response to our inquiry, he stated, "This kind of event is virtually impossible once the system was up and running. The team met with me to report their findings, and it was decided that the final report would have nothing significant in it to explain what happened at Echo flight."
Just one moment, Captain. We did not explain it, just working with my congressional research assistant on the end of the table. We are going to allow 10 minutes for each of you. I'm not sure, I just got the time sign for the captain, and I don't believe that he's been talking 10 minutes, has he? He has been talking 10 minutes. Captain, can you, and since we didn't let you know ahead of time, I'm going to give you additional 3 minutes, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. I'll
You're
try to
very
get
welcome.
through it as quickly as
That's
I
okay.
can. After meeting with the engineers to discuss the results of their investigation, Mr. Kaminsky was notified by his supervisor that he should not submit his final report because the incident was reported to be a UFO event. Even though the Boeing company was the principal contractor for the Minuteman I missile, the report on the incident was not submitted by specific request of the Air Force. However, the Air Force did perform their own classified investigation where they identified a possible failure mode as stated above. In my opinion, we did not have the technical capability to produce a machine then or now that would be able to instigate the failure mode of these missiles identified in the unit wing history. In addition, the unidentified objects displayed the physical and flight characteristics that no known aircraft type could achieve then or now. Therefore, I have concluded these objects were non-terrestrial in origin. An important related activity ongoing, and this is important, on December 17, 1969, the official U.S. Air Force investigation into the UFO phenomenon was terminated. The principal basis for this, and you have the Air Force position on UFOs, I believe. I've given you a copy of that. The principal basis for this was termination was the evaluation of a report prepared by the University of Colorado entitled Scientific Study of Unidentified Flying Objects. In 1966, the U.S. Air Force awarded a $500,000 contract to the University of Colorado for the purpose of studying the UFO phenomenon. I'll refer to this study as the Condon investigation, or its team leader, Edward Condon. In fact, it was never intended to be a scientific study because the Air Force did not propose that any scientific hypothesis regarding the phenomena be evaluated. The Condon team relied on input and evaluations of reported UFO incidents from Air Force officers at various bases. The Condon team was, except for one individual, not authorized to review classified reports of Air Force incidents regarding the phenomenon. They were not even informed that classified UFO files existed until after the termination of their study. I have evidence supporting this. With respect to the 1967 Echo and Oscar flight UFO incidents, there was a deliberate effort to keep information about those incidents from the Conduct Committee. In 1967, Dr. Roy Craig, the chief investigator for the Conduct Committee, was informed by Mr. Raymond Fowler, a contractor working for Sylvania on Minuteman Electrical Systems, that the Echo flight shutdowns at Malmstrom had occurred during a UFO sighting. In October 67, he visited Malmstrom to inquire about this. Dr. Craig recalls this inquiry with Lieutenant Colonel Lewis Chase, the base operations officer at Malmstrom. After Colonel Chase and I had exchanged pleasantries in his office, this is a quotation, I asked him about the Echo incident. The colonel caught his breath and expressed surprise that I knew of it. I can't talk about that, he said. Colonel Chase had assured me that the incident had not involved a UFO. Since Colonel Chase was the last man I would doubt, when he conveyed this information, I accepted the information as factual and turned the review over to Bob Lowe, who had received, Robert Lowe was the deputy commandant, and he was the only one cleared to look at classified information. When Dr. Robert Lowe, the deputy commandant, requested the Air Force allow him to review the secret report of the Echo incident, he was informed that the report would be too highly classified to allow that review. Dr. Craig did not interview any of the many witnesses that were named to him by Ray Fowler that he could have interviewed. He did not interview either of the crews, Echo or Oscar crew. In addition, the Air Force Office of Project Blue Book was deliberately misinformed about these incidents. In a letter from Colonel James Minot, and I think you have these letters in front of you, he was right pat, Blue Book essentially. He requested Colonel Chase in June of '67, inquired of reports they had received that there were equipment malfunctions and abnormalities during the UFO sightings. The written reply from Colonel Chase stated, this office has no knowledge of equipment malfunctions and abnormalities in equipment during the period of UFO sightings. This evidence and the Air Force...
Captain, I think you just have a short piece to go, is that right? Just one page left.
Just very short.
Yes, sir. Please proceed.
I'm almost done.
Please proceed.
And by the way, this is a very complex case.
Absolutely. We can tell that. Yes, sir. Thank you. And we appreciate your testimony.
This is evidence that the Air Force purposefully denied the Con investigators the knowledge that the Echo and Oscar flight shutdowns were UFO-related incidents. Since the Air Force cites this particular study as the primary reason for the official rejection of the UFO phenomenon, and claims that no UFO reported, investigated, and evaluated by the Air Force was ever an indication of threat to our national security. And in light of my own experience and others, I must conclude the U.S. Air Force was and is engaged in lying and disinforming the public about the realities of the UFO phenomenon. That's the end of my statement.
Thank you.
One of the other speakers present. We were on duty inside the Oscar Launch Control Center, a concrete capsule located about 60 feet underground. We had operational control over 10 Minuteman nuclear missiles. Each missile operates independently and has its own source of primary and backup power.
We'll begin with Captain Roger Sallas. Am I pronouncing that right, sir?
Salas is correct. Thank you.
Sir.
Ms. Kilpatrick and panel, I would first like to briefly describe the incident that I experienced in March 1967. At that time, I was a first lieutenant, U.S. Air Force, stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana. I was trained and assigned duties as a missile launch systems. It is important for you to note that the command and control for these missiles was entirely located within the capsule. There was absolutely no means to affect any of the missile systems from outside the capsule. On the evening of March 24, 1967, while my commander was on a scheduled rest break, I received the first of two phone officer for the Minuteman I intercontinental ballistic missile. I was designated Deputy Missile Combat Crew Commander and part of a two-man crew. My commander at that time was Lieutenant Frederick Mywald. He's now deceased. I will briefly review the diagrams showing the Launch Control Center and the launch facility. We will show you shortly when calls from my topside flight security controller. FSC. The first call was to report unidentified lighted objects flying above the facility. They reported they were flying at very high speeds, making very odd maneuvers, nothing an aircraft could do, and they just wanted to